Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I want to thank especially Director Marshall Rambeau for her time and coordination and for bringing us all together today. As Director Marshall Krempel mentioned, my name is Elisa Fertig, and I'm a Foreign Service Officer for the USDA in Brussels. And I also want to share my gratitude to Mr. Beatty and the U.S. Consulate in Western France in Rennes, as well as to my colleagues at the U.S. Embassy in Paris as well. Je suis ravie d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui, and I am delighted to continue to dialogue and bring up some of the key topics that Mr. Beatty already mentioned. So with further ado, I would welcome Director Marshall Rambeau to bring the PowerPoint to the screen and we can get started. Pictured here, you'll see me in just a second, and I'm at the very beginning of my ag journey. And today is a very important day as we are celebrating Earth Day. And as mentioned, I've been working for the United States Department of Agriculture for nearly 7 years, 6 years in DC. However, I have been hungry and curious about food, agriculture, the earth that unites us, and the family stewards of our land for many more years. Here I am, pictured in different parts of my life and where my ag journey began on the left side. In the small state of New Hampshire in the Northeast, where I'm originally from, I started my ag journey working on a vineyard and helping to grow grapes and bottle wine that we made on the vineyard and winery together. And there I am on the bottling line on the left. And as mentioned, I focused my master's thesis actually on hop production. I got scratched by the hop, one would say, and became enthralled with the 4 main ingredients in beer: yeast, water, malted barley, and hops. And here I am in the center in a hop yard in Vermont. And then on the far right, as a part of my thesis project in grad school, I put together a local indigenous beer using the hops that I grew on our university farm. And there I am holding that beer proudly. So now that you know a little bit about me and my background, I'm excited to share with you more about US agriculture. Here we see the United States of America and the variety of farms that we have throughout our country. Every blue dot you see represents 200 farms. In the United States, we have over 2 million farms and ranchers, all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast, in the top right, my small state of New Hampshire. I'm excited to take this journey with you today and give you an inside look at America's family farms. Next slide. Before I do so, I'd like to set the scene and give you some context as to the key role agriculture plays in the US economy. Seeing here at the bar chart on our screen, in 2019, agriculture, food, and related industries contributed about $1 trillion to gross domestic product in the United States, GDP. And that was about 5% share. And of that, the output of America's farms contributed about $136 billion, and that was about 0.6% of GDP. Next slide. In addition, as we can see here on the left-hand side of the pie chart, of US household consumer expenditures, food came in third at 13% share, just behind housing and transportation. And to the right here, we see the key role that agriculture plays in employment. In particular, around 22 million full and part-time jobs were related to the agriculture and food sectors in 2019, and that made up about 11% of US employment. And we can see the green portion there, that relates to direct on-farm employment, which accounted for about 2.5 million jobs, or 1.3% of US employment. Next slide. And in particular, when it comes to not just farming in the United States and domestic consumption, but also global consumption, US farmers export about 20% of what they produce. So what does that look like and what does that mean? If you look to the top left corner, you can see walnuts. And what this means is 79% of the walnuts grown in the United States are actually exported. So we as Americans are consuming about 21% of what we are producing for walnuts in the country. And in comparison, if you look below to the bottom right corner, you'll see beef. So in the United States, we consume about 90% of the beef that is produced in our country, meaning we're only exporting about 10%. And this graph chart here is from the USDA Foreign Agricultural Service, which is the agency I work for as well. Next slide. So now that we have some context as to what agriculture does and plays, what role it plays in the U.S. economy, let's dive in to see what are we going to talk about today. And let's start with the definition of what is a farm in the United States. Since 1974, the Census of Agriculture has defined a farm as any place from which $1,000 or more of agricultural products were produced and sold, or normally would have been sold during the census year. The Census of Agriculture is conducted by the USDA every 5 years, and this is where that definition comes from. And all farms and ranches are counted during that time. So what does that mean when it comes to a family farm? Next slide, please. USDA, which is my department, is the leader for farm and food agriculture in the United States, and we classify family farms as any farm organized as a sole proprietorship, partnership, or family corporation. Family farms exclude farms that are organized as non-family corporations or cooperatives, as well as farms with hired managers. In particular, what that means is that those families are owning a majority of the business as well. So now that we have an understanding of what a farm means and a family farm, I'm going to give you an idea of how we categorize family farms in the United States. On this slide here, you can see that we categorize them by 3 different categories, and they vary greatly in size as well as in characteristics. And in particular, just to give you some context, the average size farm in the United States is around 444 acres or 180 hectares. So what are the 3 categories? The first one here starts with small family farms. That means those families are making a gross cash farm income, GCFI, of less than $350,000 a year and gross annual sales. And that has 2 subcategories, low sales as well as moderate sales. And more generally speaking, family farms in this category are producing most of the US poultry in the country, including eggs as well as hay. And next, we have a mid-size family farm. That means the families are grossing between $350,000 to just about $1 million in their gross annual sales. And what that means is that this is quite a range. However, this covers quite a few array of crops in the country. Most of these family farms in this scale account for much of the cotton, cash grains, including corn, and oilseed production, which covers soybeans, rapeseed, peanuts, sunflower seed, and those crops where the value of the crop lies within its oil. And then we have the last category, which is large-scale family farms that are grossing at least $1 million or more per year. And they have 2 subcategories as well: large, which make up to $5 million, and very large, which make more than $5 million in annual sales per year. And this category, as well as the non-family farm category, dominate beef production as well as high-value crops, including vegetables, fruits, tree nuts, as well as nursery and greenhouse products as well. So now that we have an understanding of how family farms are categorized, I'd like to share with you what that really means in terms of scale in the country. So if we look at the slides here, we can see that small family farms make up nearly all US farms. They make up 90%. However, at the same time, they are operating about almost 50% of the land operated, as we see in the top right, but they're contributing only about 21% of that value of production. While on the other hand, that mid-sized and large-scale family farm categories are making up around 66% of the value of production. And we also have that non-family farm category, and that accounts for about 12% of the value of production, but only about that 2% of the farms in the country. Thank you so much. And so you can feel free to bring down the slides whenever you'd like, and we will shift over to myself. So thank you so much for allowing me to share a bit of the context with you and how we categorize family farms in the United States. Many people are surprised to see that we classify our farms based on annual sales rather than their physical size. However, a size-based measure, while it seems intuitive, can mean very different things in different places. So for example, you might have an acre of non-irrigated land in a low rainfall area, such as southern Utah. Well, it's really hard to compare that to an acre of very fertile, high rainfall land in, for example, the Palouse region of eastern Washington. So that just gives you an idea, and we'll see some examples of family farms and the differences where crops go throughout our country in just a moment. So what else do we grow in the United States? In addition to some of the crops already mentioned, we also produce a fair amount of cotton and wool. We are leaders in fruit and tree nut production, and we grow many different vegetables, beans, and rice, both organic and non-organic. And the USDA administers the National Organic Program. And we also grow a wide array of corn and soybean varieties, which help to produce the animals that we grow and feed, including cattle, chicken, pigs, and sheep. And of these crops and commodities, of course, you have a wide array of diversity across many different scales of farms, by value, as we saw earlier, but in cases, acreage as well. So without further ado, I now want to take you into America's farmland and give you a glimpse of what each of these family farms looks like, including the diversity of the crops and livestock produced, and the farmers, ranchers, as well as farm workers producing them throughout our country. So I am going to start by bringing you to more small scale, mid-scale example of a family farm, and we're going to start in the great state of Vermont. I'm going to introduce you to the Doyle Burr family in Moncton, Vermont, who run a small to mid-size operation called Last Resort Farm. They have 280 acres, and their family farm was purchased by Sam Burr and his wife, Eugenie Doyle, in 1986 from the Shattuck family, who had been dairying there and running a dairy operation for 150 years. The Doyle Burrs operated the farm initially as a conventional dairy until 1993, when unfortunately low milk prices prompted them to sell their Jersey herd and then reimagine their farm as an organic hay and produce operation. And after that 3-year transition period, they were able to become certified USDA organic as well. In the winter of 2017, their son Silas took over farm operations, and he now raises about 80 to 90 acres of hay for sale. He also collects maple sap from 1,200 taps and grows 20 acres of small fruit, vegetables, cover crops, and hemp. And their farm operates an on-site farm stand, a farm share program, and retails at 3 local farmers markets. They also provide wholesale produce to area schools, restaurants, and food stores in the surrounding area. And this video that I'm about to share with you also mentions some of their conservation practices as well. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to the Doyle Burr family in Moncton, Vermont.
We look at it as being stewards. As long as we're being good stewards, that's a great thing. We've been here since 1985. I work with my wife Eugenie and my son Silas. We have 280 acres or so. We grow small fruits and vegetables and a lot of hay. We've worked hard to try to make a sustainable business here. So we now have 3 hoop houses, 2 of which are NRCS ones. The hoop houses are a real blessing, whether it's dry or incredibly wet like last year was. A hoop house, you can regulate the moisture and you can regulate the fertilizer. And it also means that you're not losing excess nutrients into the brook, which hopefully helps us all.
Thank you so much for joining me in Vermont with the Doyle bird family. And I believe Mandy just shared a link to the video in the chat as well, so you can feel free to take a look at that video again later on. And as you could see, we got a glimpse of their hoop houses to their on-site farm stand, as well as their local farmers market. And I hope this gave you some good insight into this operation and a more small-scale family farm in Vermont. Next, I'd like to take you briefly out west to Idaho and then back east to New York, where I will introduce you to 2 sheep farmers. The first is Flat Top Sheep Company, a ranch in Idaho owned by Tom, John, and Diane Peavy. The ranch was first established in 1925 and now has a conservation easement through the Nature Conservancy. The Peavies want to run their operation in a profitable and environmentally sensitive way, and they want to see their ranch prosper and pass along to future generations as a united operation. In this video, you will also meet John with Elisa Acres Farm, a family-run 500-acre sheep farm in Jamesville, New York, which specializes in pasture-raised, grass-fed, hormone antibiotic-free lamb and wool production. This is a newer family farm. In fact, in 2014, John retired from the Army after 27 years and moved his family back to central New York. He now runs the farm with his wife, Martha, their daughter, Olivia, and their son, JJ. They founded the farm in memory of their daughter, Ellie, who unfortunately passed away. Elisa Acres Farm. You'll see their flock. Their flock was initially 20 breeding sheep and is now grown to over 100. And they started initially selling cut to order whole and half lamb to friends and family. And now you'll see they're supplying local restaurants and farmers markets. So without further ado, I'd like to take you to Idaho to meet the Peavies and back over to New York to Elisa Acres Farm.
I'm a sheep rancher, not to get wealthy, that's for sure. It's tough work, but it's so gosh darn rewarding that you couldn't give it up if you wanted to.
The Army is the #1 domestic consumer of wool and probably will be for many years. We wanted to have a farm. We didn't know exactly where. We didn't know exactly what. And my Army career is what actually led to us choosing sheep.
When Beast and Bottle opened and we were going with this idea of a lamb house, I mean, they're serving Colorado lamb in the bistros in Paris, so why is there no restaurant here in Colorado that's focused completely on that? So every Tuesday we have a whole lamb arrive at the restaurant, and there's, even to this day, 7 years in, there's an excitement when the truck pulls up and drops off the lamb. And that really dictates the way that our entire week, our entire menu is going to go. And every single part finds its way onto our menu, whether it be in cured lamb pancetta, smoked lamb bacon, braised lamb shoulders, lamb sausages, things of that nature, things that people can relate to and things that people can crave. Not only is having American lamb on our menu an easy choice for its robust, delicious flavor, but we're honoring the integrity of that animal. We're honoring what the care that our rancher has put into this animal. We're honoring how this animal was raised in local lands. And I think by using all those parts and presenting it to our guests, we're continuing that story of integrity from rancher to guest.
I would love to be a sheep.
Thank you so much for joining me with Flat Top Sheep Company Ranch and Ellie's Acres Farm, and hopefully that video got you a little hungry as well. You can see that roaming sheep are providing local restaurants delicious lamb while also helping to supply wool to the U.S. military as well. And thank you again, Mandy, for posting a link to that video, so you can feel free to watch the whole video as well later on. Now I'm going to take you to the Midwest, to Floyd County, Iowa, to meet Pam Johnson. Pam is going to talk about how farming has changed through the generations and what farmers are doing today to conserve the land. Pam is a 6th-generation farmer, and she's operating in more of that mid-sized to large-size scale. She farms with her husband and 2 sons, and they grow corn and soybeans on 2,700 acres. Pam will discuss some of their tillage practices too, including no-till, minimum till, and strip till. So without further ado, I will introduce you to the Johnsons.
I farm with my husband and 2 sons. We farm in northern Iowa. We grow corn and soybeans, and my husband and I are both 6th-generation farmers. This will be our 42nd harvest together as a married couple, and so farming's changed a lot for us through those 42 years, but I think most of the changes have happened in the last 10 years that I've seen happen here. And I think there's more opportunity out in the countryside now for the younger generation to come back and get involved. And we were able to bring both of our kids back to the farm and so they're working and living in a small rural community. Well, farming has always changed through the generations, but we have seen a lot of changes in the last 10 years. Science, technology, computer technology brought back to the farm. We use a lot of that. We have more computers in our tractors and combines now than we do in the house. So we're able to do precision farming, which means we can precisely plant seeds and apply fertilizers and use during harvest. We don't have to use as much to produce more on an acre of land, which is the size of a football field, than we did back in the days when my parents and grandparents farmed. We have access to better technology, better farming methods. So we've planted filter strips, we've planted wetlands, we've planted trees. Some things have stayed the same, and that is, as a farmer, we always want to use the best methods that we can and conserve the natural resources so that when the next generation, if they so choose, want to farm, that we can leave that to them in a better shape than when we found it. We no longer plow the land in the fall. We leave all of the organic material or the corn stalks on the field to prevent wind erosion or water erosion, and that doing so adds organic matter back to the soil and also conserves water for the next crop. It's really, I think, a great feeling to know that there is opportunity for the next generation.
Thank you so much for joining me in Iowa and the Midwest for a little bit and getting to know Pam and her conservation practices she is instilling on her farm and their 2,700 acres of corn and soybeans. Now I'd like to take you to another type of farming that we haven't quite touched upon, and that is urban farming. Aside from the three categories we already discussed, the small, mid-size, and large, we also have that non-family farm category. And that's where you would find urban farming. And it's still significant. As we learned earlier, that non-family category still accounts for 12% of the value of agricultural production in the United States. And urban farms are contributing to that. They're not necessarily family run, but they are community run and community initiated. And so without further ado, I will share a video on urban farming, and you will also see a little bit about USDA's work on conservation through the Natural Resources Conservation Service, NRCS.
15% of the world's food is now grown in urban areas. You can find it in backyard community gardens, in green spaces nestled between city buildings, in vacant lots beside freeways, right in the middle of suburban housing developments, and even on city rooftops. Farmers in the city, bringing people closer to their food. They convert food waste into healthy soils, grow food, then deliver it to people right in their own neighborhoods. As educators, they build personal relationships that can change the way their communities look at what and how they eat. The USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service can provide urban farms with both technical and financial assistance to make critical on-farm conservation improvements. Urban settings can produce large amounts of waste. These can leach into the surrounding soil, presenting unique challenges, so urban farmers often test their soils for contaminants like heavy metals before they get started. NRCS can provide farmers with technical information on soil mitigation strategies tailored to a farm's specific needs to ensure food is grown in a safe environment. NRCS can also provide both technical and financial assistance for installing high tunnels, allowing farmers to extend their growing seasons, shelter crops from weather extremes, manage pests, and help protect against drift from pesticides and pollen. And NRCS can develop irrigation water management plans that help urban farmers with wells, or conservation practices like rainwater catchment and automated water-efficient drip irrigation systems to help reduce their water use. Other USDA agencies also have assistance for urban farmers. Check out USDA's Urban Agricultural Toolkit for more helpful resources for urban farmers.
Thank you so much for joining me in the city for a little bit and getting a better feel for urban farming and urban farm life, as they are playing a key role in the US economy as well. From helping to improve food waste to food access, urban farming is paving an important path forward. And speaking of looking forward, I'd like to now discuss a few of the trends that we see going forward in family farming. And I want to thank Mr. B for bringing up some key themes earlier as it pertains to farming here in France as well. So when we think about the future of farming, there are several interrelated issues that come to mind. One is discussing the long-term viability of the nation's family farms. And it's important to note that an estimated 70% of US farmland will change hands in the next 20 years. Currently, the average age of the American farmer is about 58 years old. I think earlier we learned in France it's about 40, so a little bit older. And some family operations may or may not have a next generation farmer willing and able to continue farming the family operation. Thus, it's important that farms and ranches and those families have adequately planned for succession. And if not, then the farm could potentially go out of business, be absorbed perhaps into a neighboring farm, or be converted to non-farm uses. Looking at other trends, we're also seeing increasing popularity in local produce, as well as direct and regional marketing. And these are seen as key new opportunities for small and beginning farmers, especially those looking to become more financially secure. When it comes to finances, that's also an area we're continuing to monitor, and the need to supplement incomes off the farm with the on-farm income as well. Many family farm households have to combine the two to generate income and also to receive other benefits from off-farm employment. Off-farm occupation farms are those the principal operator of the family farm reports doing something other than farming as their main occupation. Over 80% of those operators do work at an off-site location, as do 62% of their spouses, so quite a few. And those principal operators are usually on the more small to mid-sized scale farms. Principal operators of the large scale farms, those making about $1 million of gross annual sales a year or more, are a bit less likely to take that off-farm employment. And in cases where spouses of principal operators held an off-farm job, a majority cited healthcare benefits or health insurance as one reason for working off the farm. And these are issues we will be continuing to talk about and to work through. And as we understand and have learned earlier in those three categories I mentioned, and as well as the pie charts we saw, most US farms are small family farms. However, the majority of agricultural production of food and fiber is occurring on that large scale, as well as the mid-sized scale family farms. So with that said, I'd like to share one more example of a more large scale family farm operation. And I'd like to take you to Texas to not just meet one, but several farmers and understand how Texas farmers grow pecans or pecans. And the video I will share with you is through the eyes of one pecan farmer, Papa Pecan. He's a grower in El Paso, Texas. And the video you will see was supported by the Texas Pecan Board. The Texas Pecan Board was elected by and on behalf of Texas pecan producers to develop and carry out programs of research and disease and insect control, predator control, education, and overall promotion to support the production, marketing, use, and consumption of Texas pecans. And this organization is just one example of the many different organizations that exist throughout the country to support family farms in America. So without further ado, I'd like to take you to Texas to see our last family farm of the day through the eyes of Papa Pecan.
Crystalline orbs on the ceiling, stories that play in your head, shadows that dance on the edge of believing, whispering that dreams are better dead. Tell me a story about when you were young. Sing to me a song of nostalgia's bitter sun. Paint me a picture with your words. Use the colors of honey, the colors of share away the rainbow, blind to all the bones they left here. Tell me a story about when you grow old. Sing to me a song of tomorrow's home. Paint me a picture with your words. Use the colors of honey, the colors of honey, the colors of honey, and the feathers of the bird.
Thank you so much for joining me in Texas and joining me on this whole ag journey today, from small to mid-sized to large-scale farms. I hope you could see today that the face of the American farmer is strong and it is diverse. And there are few groups as resilient and as determined as American farm families, which our USDA Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, quoted very recently. In particular, he noted that whatever the size and value of one's farm, from the smaller examples we saw earlier in Vermont to the larger scale pecan fields we just were able to walk through, USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, is committed to creating a fairer, more equitable system for farms of all sizes to compete and to remain profitable. And in particular, the USDA is very focused on investing in innovative research. We saw some of the work that NRCS is doing on urban farming, and also with the sole idea to give family farms the tools that we saw being used in multiple ways to conserve and to be more sustainable, profitable, and productive as these families face agricultural and economic challenges throughout the year and in years to come. And Secretary Vilsack also noted recently that when American farmers have a chance to compete, they have a greater chance at succeeding. So thank you again for joining me today. The story of agriculture in America cannot be told without recognizing all of the farmers, ranchers, and farm workers you saw today. And that includes contributions from all Americans, young, old, men, and women, and especially people of color, Black Americans, Hispanics, and people within minority groups as well. Together, all American farm families are contributing to creating and cultivating food, clothes, and energy production for hopefully a brighter future, while also inspiring children, their children, and youth to become that next generation of family farmers someday. And the history, as we saw today, is their history, is their family farm history, and this is our American story. And it's one that's diverse in its farm value, as we learn the different scales and how we define family farms by farm income, as well as crop variety. We learned that most walnuts grown in the United States are actually exported, but we consume most of the beef that we produce. And we also grow a variety of organic fruits and vegetables. And also, these dynamics are varied, and they are the backbone of our American farm story, and will continue to be essential for U.S. agriculture to continue to grow and to prosper into the coming years. Now, with that being said, I'd like to share a brief message from our USDA Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, as he presented some words in honor of Americans American farm families and farm workers. And I'd like to share that with you. It's focused on some of the words he shared on our National Ag Day and Ag Week this year. So without further ado, our USDA Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack.
Hello, I'm Tom Vilsack. Please join with me to celebrate National Ag Day in the United States and to recognize the value of our farmers, ranchers, and producers and those who work and labor in our farm fields. These folks provide safe and abundant food for all of us, making us a food secure nation. They make sure that our food is affordable, helping to build a strong and diverse economy. These folks allow us to export food all over the world to help create jobs here at home, while also making sure that people understand the importance of the American brand of excellence in food production. Our farmers are poised to lead the way to a net zero emission future to better protect our planet and improve our soil health and water quality. Our farmers reflect the great diversity of our country in race and gender, as well as size of operation, production methods, and the products that they produce and raise. They also share common cause and their pride of being a farmer, rancher, and producer. So let all of us take today as an opportunity to say thank you to those who farm, ranch, and produce for all of us and for all of America.
Thank you so much for listening to me today and joining me on a journey through a look at America's family farms. Whether you find yourself smelling some tulips like I have here in honor of Earth Day, or walking through a field of sunflowers, or enjoying perhaps a handful of American pecans, thank a farmer and thank your farmer. And I hope I inspired you to think about the role that agriculture plays in our own lives and how you can continue to thank the earth as well. And I'd like to continue the dialogue today as we all participate in Earth Day. So thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Elisa. Our American story, it's so interesting and so diverse, and really wonderful to see the videos of those families there. It gives us a lot of content and things to think about. We're happy to open up to questions. If you have a question, you can open up your microphone. Bev.
Hello. Thank you for your presentation, and it brings me back home. But I thought it was very interesting when you talked about the future and the trends and everything, and the difficulties that certain families, the spouses have to go to work because they don't have health benefits. And that is one of the big problems in all of America, something that we don't have here in Europe as much. And I was wondering what's coming up in the Biden administration for farm families, for protecting the smaller farms, and going perhaps as healthcare for the farmers, but other aspects too. What's the Biden administration aiming for now?
Thank you so much, Bev. It's lovely to meet you, and I'm glad that you enjoyed the presentation, and you raise a really, really important question. I would say that the Biden administration is still rolling out how they foresee some of their policies, but I would say inclusivity is really important, and ensuring that farm families of all scales, as we saw today, from very small scales, we noted a farm starts at that $1,000 mark, so and goes up to beyond 5 million. And so I think what's really critical is to the current administration is ensuring that there are programs in place to support all those scales of farming, and as well as farmers of all backgrounds. I think that we've seen there hasn't been as much focus on that, and our secretary recently did a podcast talking a bit about how agricultural legislation hasn't always been in the favor of minority groups as well. And I think that will be a big shift, and how that plays a role in that off-farm income aspect. I don't know the specifics yet, but I know that our Secretary of Agriculture, Tom Vilsack, has been talking about it a lot more recently, and I think we'll start to see some more progress.
Hey, Lisa, it's Eric out at the U.S. Consulate in Rennes. I was intrigued by the fact that walnuts, most of our walnuts are exported, right? That, if I understood correctly, most of our nut production is exported. Do you know which nuts are preferred in Europe? Because I had seen some statistics of USDA statistics of exports to France, and I was astonished to find that, in fact, walnuts and other nuts are right at the top of the list for U.S. exports to, I guess, exports to France. You have any updates about that? About net exports?
That's a great question. I would say, off the top of my head, I don't know the numbers exactly as it breaks down for tree nut production, but I would say that almonds and peanuts are right up there. As well. I'm not sure the exact figures for walnuts, but I know that we're constantly monitoring those, and we are really proud to supply Europe with our nut production, and hope that continues into the coming years. And Eric, I'm happy to follow up later on with some figures for you.
Absolutely. No, it's just something I was intrigued by, because I work with farm implements and all sorts of other things, and I was astonished to see. I would have thought American beef would have been higher, but in fact, it's not as high. As it's only specialty restaurants apparently import American beef. But one comment is that I grew up around, we say pecans.
I know. And
I grew up around pecan trees in our house, in our yard, and in East Texas. And I didn't know there were any pecan trees in El Paso. Absolute revelation for me that in West Texas there were pecan trees. So anyway, Texas is so huge. Well, of course, it makes perfect sense, and I admired the spacing of the pecan trees. If you notice how they were spaced out, because they require a lot of water, and they grow better when they're spaced out and not bunched up together.
Absolutely, yeah. And I try to say pecan. And every time my Northeast roots just give me pecan. So
we wouldn't understand. I swear, most East Texans wouldn't understand what you're talking about when you say pecans. Anyway, I liked it. Thank you for that. Very enlightening. I like the videos a lot too.
Thank you very much.
I found it very interesting in Iowa that they were no longer plowing in the fall for the corn. Because we all have those images of the Dust Bowl and why that happened, and because everybody was plowing and the wind was just picking up all the topsoil. And so I think things are changing, and I think that's a lot of what the message came across with the different farmers. And as the next generation is, I think, the big issue here, and I don't know, we'll see how we can support. In our little way, the library has a collection of books on sustainable agriculture. And so you're welcome to borrow those books. This is part of our Think Big, Think Green program, which is also bringing discussions between students here in France in agriculture high school, lycée, and students in Austin, Texas. And so that discussion is really what this program is about. And that's what we're doing this morning, is talking to each other and trying to understand and putting these words into our mouths. And thank you, Elisa. Any other last question? I know we started a little late, so that we have a little bit of time. Mandy's coming on. Yep.
Here we go. Elisa, thank you. I'm sorry, we muted you. Thank you so much for your presentation. Your microphone is off, so you might want to turn it back on. I'm sorry, that was my fault. My question was, what is being done on a national scale in the United States to reduce food waste? I know there are different efforts that can be done at each step in food production, from the farms to the retail, but what is being done? Is there a campaign to encourage less food waste from these farms? Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will be honest, I'm not an expert in food waste, so I can't. I would be happy to follow up with more detailed information, but I would say there is certainly more work in this area being done than ever before, and I would say a lot of it is in coordination with food banks as well, and as well as the legal. Sometimes the regulations can kind of get in a little bit tricky here, so you really have to be very careful about what point is it considered waste? So is it an apple that fell off the tree and it can't go to market and maybe there's another use for it, or is it for example, was there a large party and there's a huge amount of food still left that can go somewhere else, and so it kind of just depends. But I would say there's a lot more efforts in this area about across the country. And I apologize, I don't have specifics, but I would be happy to follow up with you and provide you more information.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. Wonderful, really great to have you. Thank you so much for this Earth Day celebration with us. We're kicking it off. And so it was very, very special talk. Thank you for sharing all your ideas. And we'll see everybody soon. We will have, in the month of June, another talk, and we'll be keeping you up to date with other events happening for our Think Big, Think Green program. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.